In this episode of The Bear Roars, Dan Caruso sits down with film producer Jason Berman, founder of Vantage Pictures, to explore his path through independent film, studio filmmaking, and the evolving creative landscape. Jason shares how growing up with dyslexia shaped his connection to movies, his early years producing films that premiered at Sundance, and his experience building and leading projects across both independent and studio systems. He reflects on launching Vantage Pictures, why Boulder has become an important creative base for him, and how Sundance's move to Colorado could reshape the region's cultural future. Let's poke the bear to kick off the conversation.
All right, one of our newest Boulder creative geniuses, I think is fair to say, when we get through everything you've already done in your career. Moving from Boulder to LA is Jason Berman of a new entity that he recently created that he's going to tell us all about, Vantage Pictures, and part of the growing creative scene here in Boulder and in Colorado, which we're going to talk a lot about. So welcome.
Thank you.
And
Thanks
welcome
for having
to Boulder,
me, Dan.
even though you've been here close to a year. We
no,
only met recently.
more than that. 4 years. 4
Why
years.
do I keep thinking you came here earlier?
Well, we
this
because
year?
we just met we just met in the last year. That's probably why.
Gotcha. But you came here from where?
From Los Angeles.
And Los Angeles, you got there via Baltimore, is that right?
Via Baltimore. So grew up in Baltimore, moved to LA to go to the University of Southern California School of Cinematic Arts in 2002. Graduated in 2006, and then was in LA all the way up until I moved here in December of 2021.
Great. And we're going to get into a lot of what you've done is in your career. A lot of Sundance Film Festival awards, multiple pictures that have grossed significant amounts of money. So we're going to cover a lot of that, and we're going to cover that you recently launched your own studio, and you're going to bring us through that. But let's go back a number of years. We mentioned Baltimore.
Yeah.
And your first experiences discovering your interest in film and creativity happened when you were quite young.
Yeah, it did. Right? It did. And I was watching one of your other podcasts, and I think it was the sommelier that you were interviewing who talked about being dyslexic.
Yes.
Am I right about that? Okay.
Yes, and Bobby Stuckey.
Yeah, Bobby Stuckey. And so I'm dyslexic. And so growing up, learning to read and write was really challenging.
So for those of us who aren't dyslexic, tell us what that is like.
So it's,
and how did you discover that you were? Because it's not obvious.
So dyslexia is a learning difference, and it basically just means that there's more activity in certain areas of your brain and less activity in others. Whereas I think a non-dyslexic brain, the activity is more equalized. And so your strengths and your weaknesses can be very polar opposite of each other. So it's interesting, like when they do, from my understanding, because I had to do a lot of this when I was younger, but when they do like IQ testing of somebody that is not dyslexic, and they're going into those certain subsets that they're testing, the graph is pretty even across the board. Whereas with a dyslexic, it will be like this.
Yep.
Like there'll be low lows and high highs. And that has to do with the activity in the brain. And so...
Is that back when you were growing up, did they just do that test as a matter of standards that we all
No. It was I got tested because my dad was dyslexic. Okay. And so there was a higher likelihood that I would be dyslexic. A lot of times people will go through school and, they'll only get themselves into a tricky situation, and then somebody may suggest to the parents to get tested for a learning difference. But I had gotten tested because my dad and my grandfather were dyslexic. And so anyway, I tested dyslexic and was able to go to one of the first schools in the country that was specifically designed for the education of dyslexic students, which just happened to be in Baltimore, called the Gemesey School. And because reading and writing was harder for me, because that's where there's just less activity going on in that part of the brain where that, where those functions are processed. I always loved watching movies because it was an easier way for me to learn. And the way in which Gemesey taught was by a method at the time called Orton-Gillingham, which was named after two doctors that their last names were Orton and Gillingham. And it's a multi-sensory approach to learning. And so when you're learning to write, it's like you're writing in sand, or you're writing with, like icing, or and when you're reading, you're learning in a different way. And when you're actually doing science, instead of reading about it, like you're actually physically creating things. And so, like your auditory senses are heightened, your smell is heightened, olfactory, I guess is what they call it. And so that was generally how we learned it at Genesee. Well, of course, that kind of dovetails really nicely into, watching movies, because it would be easier for me to watch to learn than it was to read. And so I would learn by watching films. And then ultimately it became easier for me to make films than it was for me to write a paper.
Mm.
And so,
Is that true in general? Like a lot of people with dyslexia, do they gravitate towards certain more creative fields?
yeah, generally a lot of dyslexics will succeed either actually in science is one, aeronautics, athletics, and sports,
And with each of those, can you why in
the
each of
arts.
those
I,
does
I think I would say, I mean, with me specifically, because if I didn't go into the arts, I would have probably been a really good like chemist or physics person, because I'm very good with like concrete details, and that's easy. Like the black and white areas are easier for me than the gray. So like obviously writing is something that can tend to really succeed in the gray area versus like the black and white. So I think that like dyslexics tend to excel in things that maybe are a little bit more concrete in nature, and I think science can be that. Obviously, physically, because it's using your body, and that's something that is I think concrete. And then the arts is actually less concrete, which is interesting. But some dyslexics just kind of go in that direction, because I think it's easier for them to express themselves
gotcha?
through the arts than it is through reading or writing. Um, Even though the arts can obviously involve a lot of writing aspects of it, and dyslexics will ultimately learn how to get better at that. But what the great thing about this school was that it focused on each individual student's needs, and then helped them succeed in what they were really good at. So therefore, everything got lifted. Because when you're a dyslexic student and you're not going to a school that's like kind of specialized, you could just get overwhelmed and then fail in everything. Whereas if you are really good at succeeding in certain things, because that's where they're really helping you with, then like, as people will say, like all ships rise. So it's like you'll just get naturally better at other things that you may have been weaker in. And so the school I went to, I mean, when I was there, it was literally like a 10-to-1 teacher ratio.
Mm.
And then that was like your grade was like 10 to 12 to 1, and then your English class maybe 3 or 4 to 1.
Wow.
So it was. So anyway, I fell in love with movies because I was dyslexic. And and the other thing that contributed towards being dyslexic was was you have to succeed, you've got to be really persistent. Or it's too easy to just give up, because it's really hard to break through those barriers of trying to learn how to read and write. And so persistence has also helped me a lot in the film industry as well.
So a lot of people are good at watching movies, and you
Yeah.
said you enjoyed watching, but watching and making are two very different things. When did you know that the producing and creating of film was something that was both interesting to you and something that you were going to be good at?
Yeah, I would say, well, I mean, when I was in elementary and middle school, I started the film and video program. So that was one thing. Like I actually wrote to, when I was like 12 or 13 years old, I wrote to the chairman of the CEO of Sony Electronics of America,
Really?
explaining why I thought a school for dyslexics would benefit from having a video program. And in return, they donated a bunch of video equipment. So that was producing
How did
right
that
there.
note even get through?
I got the address. They were based in I think it was Baskin Ridge, New Jersey, if I remember correctly. And that's where Sony Corporation of America was based. And I must have written a very compelling letter on school letterhead, and it got to the right person.
And
they
you
did.
you don't have a copy of that, does that?
No, there's a copy of it, I think, somewhere.
Oh, really?
And I had also sent a VHS tape along of like one of the shows that I had recorded at the school. So that was producing. And then it was starting the video program in middle school, which obviously benefited me, but then a lot of other dyslexic students at the school. I did the exact same thing in my high school. And got equipment donated from a company called Avid, which is the leader in creating, along with Apple, in creating computer equipment for the editing of television and movies. And so I started just like creating these programs in middle school and high school that I benefited from and other people benefited from by getting equipment donated to start video programs. And we would, we would do, news broadcasts, we would film the shows and sports and all different types of school programmatic things, like I would create the videos for the auctions. Each year these nonprofit organizations, as you know, have fundraisers. And, I would create a video about the school, which would, bring everybody to the room into an emotional state so they would donate more money during the live auction. So I always loved it. Like it was easier for me to read. It was easier for me to make stuff than it was to read and write. And so then that just, at that point, it's like I knew I was going to film school. And by the way, I didn't know that any of this was producing, right? When I was in middle school and high school, I thought what I was doing, and so did everyone else, that I was directing. It wasn't until I got to film school at USC that I realized that, wait a second, actually what I was doing was producing. And we can talk a little bit more about specifically what producing is, but...
well, let's go there now. So give us more of a description of here's what producing entails versus here's what directing entails.
Definitely. So producing is like being a massive party planner or being like the the lead project manager or lead architect on a building. You have a vision, you're helping to see it through, and you're helping to put a bunch of people in line with your vision, and then the filmmaker, the director's vision, who you partner with, to help bring something to life. So as the producer, you're dealing with both the creative and the business side. If it's an independent film, you have to raise the money. If it's a studio film, you have to help put on the proper talent attachments, the proper actor attachments to get a studio to engage with it. Sometimes I'm partnering with the director based on a script that they wrote that they want me to produce, or I'm got my own idea for a movie and I'm going to find a writer to write it, and then ultimately bring a director on. And so you're helping to package the entire project. You're helping.
You use the first person there. Have you done it both ways in equal proportion?
Yeah.
Or you prefer?
I would say to date, I've done it more as working with a writer-director who's going to direct their own film. But
they come with the idea and they're bringing you on as the producer.
And that was most of my Sundance movies. So most independent films are actually that way, where they're writer-director driven from the initial stage. The writer writes the script to direct it. Now, the bigger movies that I've been doing, like the most recent ones that are bigger budget, those were actually written by other writers that we then found directors on. And one of them was actually written by, was like initially a conceit that I got the rights to, that I had to go find a writer to come in with a pitch
and you
for.
said you got the rights to, did you pursue the rights?
I did. It was the remake of an Akira Kurosawa film called High and Low, which we then just made with Spike Lee and Denzel Washington.
Yeah. And we'll come back to that because I want to talk a lot about that because that's a very, very recent project, one that is playing out now. But let's get into more where's your, now that you have years of experience of doing many different ways, where's your biggest area of enjoyment at this point? Is it where you're finding a script and then bringing it to life, or?
It's in both, right? If it's in finding a filmmaker who has a brilliant idea that I can help bring to life, or it's also in finding something that I think could make a great movie and helping to build it. Either way, as a producer, I'm helping to build both projects, and so that is my favorite aspect of.
Do some of them just come up with? You come up with ideas at times, not even a script, but
just an idea.
Something. What's an example
So, for example, we're doing some writers' rooms over the next couple of months for Sony Pictures. So they basically, the head of Sony Pictures said to me, obviously you're good at getting movies made. We'll fund you to bring writers into what we'll call a writers' room on the lot. So we're going to do our first one this upcoming Thursday. You come up with the concepts, and
Give us a visual for what a writer's room
so
format would be.
it would be like in this case 5 or 6 writers sitting around a conference table, being led by the producers are leading it, and then you've got like a whiteboard that you can.
So they're doing this together. The writers who are coming at it with different ideas, or are they working together?
They're going to be working together towards one idea, which is our idea, and then at the end of the room, we then ideally pick one of the writers or 2 of the writers to write it.
Okay.
But for example,
so they're almost they're helping you flesh out ideas, but they're auditioning at the same time.
That's exactly right. So, for example, there's a lot of 2 of the initial rooms we're going to do. One is about like reinventing a classic literature piece into like a current day movie. I.e. Wuthering Heights, which is coming out next year, I think over Valentine's Day. That was a classic piece of literature. Obviously, we've seen Romeo and Juliet created in many different ways with different names, Sense and Sensibility. So we're going to try to pick a piece of classic literature to reinvent into like a modern age story. That's one. And then the other one is actually more of a specific idea where we want to do a thriller set on Wall Street, probably most likely like the New York Stock Exchange, where some event is happening and it's all contained within the environment of the New York Stock Exchange and nobody can get out. And, there's very high stakes and people are trying to figure out like how to manage that.
Can you share a little more? So
that's
I ran this company, Zayo, that we took public on New York Stock Exchange. So I certainly have a big visual for what it feels like to be on the stock exchange from the vantage point of a CEO taking a company public. But when you're saying an event is happening, does it start as a normal day on the stock exchange?
It just starts as a normal day on the stock exchange, and then there's some type of like event that has to do with like maybe some meltdown in a big business element, a big disruption,
the stock market,
and the stock market,
and there's a story playing out on the floor
of the stock exchange.
Is it current day, or is it because backwards in time before it's so
I think it's going to be
automated?
I think it's going to be current day.
Current day?
Yeah, that would be our goal for the room, is for it to be current day. And so then we're going to work with writers to flesh that out. Like, what is that event? What does it look like? Who are the central characters? What is the tension? What are the specific aspects of the tension that are happening? Like, who's the main character? Who's the antagonist? What is it that's happening outside the stock exchange that's causing this? So, so then we're going to develop these ideas out with 5 writers collectively, and then ideally pick 1 or 2 of the writers at the end of the room to go off and write the screenplay.
That's fine. I want to talk more about that. So you're familiar with the book Flash Boys?
Yes.
So we end up buying Spread Networks, which was the fiber network that was built in order to enable kind of the fast trading and the high frequency and low latency trading. It was interesting to see how that creation of that fiber network and the trading dynamic around it was turned first into a book and then although when it was turned into a movie, it was there must have been some kind of battle over rights, because when it turned into a movie, it wasn't Flash Boys, it was kind of a fictional account of something very similar to Flash Boys, which was unfortunate. But it was interesting to see how that had to be created from kind of an idea, a notion. So what I'm fascinated with is, when I think of how startups work, I've never heard a similar concept used in startups where you get multiple people who could be candidates to help launch a startup. There's a concept about studios, like startup studios, which is different than accelerators. Studios is where the investors, are part of the creation of the ideas and the forming the team. So instead of having a team come to them to back the business ideas and then you fund it as a venture investor, you're helping to catalyze the idea into a business. But I've never heard it done in a way that you described, where it's like, we're going to get, room full of, of entrepreneurs who are there because they understand in general that type of business. And then we're going to have them brainstorm to help develop the business plan. And then we're going to, potentially work with one or two of them to actually build out the business.
And by the way, the one other thing too is that with something like this, that all the writers still can participate. Like, if the movie ends up getting made, there still would be a pot for all the people that were in that initial room to participate.
So they have
So there's a
economic
joint interest.
upside.
There's an economic upside, but also I'll say this: like, writing is a very solitaire process, and I'm friends with a lot of writers, and basically they're sitting by themselves at their computer all day. If you can give a writer a reason and you pay them to come out for a day to sit in a room with other writers and to create a conversation and to have lunch and you feed them and all that, like, it's actually nice. like because they're so solitaire, this is actually like, they like doing it. Yeah. I think for that reason, because it's so different from what they're doing on a daily basis.
The hardest thing I've done in my life, I wrote a book, as you probably know, Bandwidth, which is a thick book. And it was one I felt compelled to write for reasons where I wanted to capture what happened in this industry dynamic that lasted 20 or 30 years. And I wanted to do it for really for the people who participated in this revolution that was the infrastructure of the internet. But it was hard for the reasons you just said. There were hours and hours and hours and hours of just pushing yourself to kind of make progress.
Yeah.
And, as someone who's not that type of writer, I had to really force myself to do it and kind of somehow drive myself to get to the finish line, but zero interest in doing that again.
Yeah, I
Hard.
could never do it. Yeah. I could never do it. I mean, on top of being everything that dyslexia deals with, I could never do that. But that's an example of like something I'm producing. And so I really would equate producing to like you're the grand orchestrator, like you're the big party planner, you're the person putting all of the pieces of the puzzle together, and then having to be very persistent to push it up a hill to make it happen.
So let's talk about a couple of big breaks that would have came your way earlier in your career.
Yeah.
Do any big breaks come to mind where?
Yeah, I will start. So, I mean, I would say the first one was I was able to raise money when I was in the summer between my freshman and sophomore year when I was in film school.
Really?
To shoot a short film.
Because it would have been different. I mean, short films today are it's a whole different world.
Yeah.
We're gonna hopefully have time to talk about the cutting edge of how film and video is being created, but the time frame you were talking about, that wasn't as common. I mean,
no, it wasn't.
It
I mean, there wasn't and there wasn't really like the internet didn't necessarily have like a platform to put short films on like it does now. But yeah, I helped raise like I think it was $40,000 to do a graduate thesis short film during the summer of 2003. 2003, 2003. And I
was a little worried about your aging process.
I know. I always mess that up. But it was the foundation of raising money was that it was like a mixture. The crew was equal grad students and equal undergrad students. So equal last year graduate students and then first year going into second year undergrad students. So we created like this mentorship program. And that was the thesis of how I was able to raise money for the short film. And so that was a big win because I became known at USC for being this undergrad student who was able to like bring a short film to life. And most people, at that time didn't want to go into film school to be producers. They wanted to go and be writers, directors, editors, cinematographers, production designers. And I wanted to be a producer. So I was able to produce a short film with a crew of about probably 40 people that was half undergrad and half grad. And I was the kid who made it happen, and I was only going into my sophomore year of undergrad. So that was a big break for me because it laid the groundwork for the rest of my time at USC to become like the guy who was known to be the producer who could produce a short film and get it done.
So put USC's film program in perspective. How does that rank against the other top programs?
It's one of the best. It's one of the best. I would say every other year USC and NYU kind of rotate back and forth. But In my opinion, USC is, the
Of
best film
course.
school in the world. And also, there's a lot larger of a film industry in Los Angeles than
Sure.
there is in New York, whereas New York is more broadcast and TV. So
How hard was it to get into that program?
it was hard. I actually did not initially, I only initially got into the communications program at USC, because, most schools actually, their film and TV programs are within the School of Communications. At USC, it was separate. So I did not get into the School of Film my first try when I applied from high school, but I was able to transfer in. I got in my sophomore year. So it's a really competitive school to get into. I think they say at the time, at least, it's competitively harder to get into the USC School of Cinematic Arts than it is to get into Harvard. And it was, yeah, so I was very fortunate I was able to get in. Um, and, uh, and so, yeah, I went and produced this short film, which I think also was probably part of the reason I got into the film school too, because
Yeah,
I did that
that's a big
before
break.
I fully got in. So that was a big break. And then when I got into the film school my sophomore year, I just continued producing for the remainder of the 3 years of undergrad and produced about 7 short films. I believe 4 graduate level and 3 undergrad level.
And where would the funding come from to do this?
We would literally, you'd raise it from friends and family and from different nonprofits. Like, so for example, the short film where I was putting together the combination of like the undergrad and the grad students, like that was of interest to some nonprofits because it was like a mentorship program. And then the filmmakers would have their own friends and family that they would raise money from. And then there were vendors. So like you would go to Panavision, which makes film cameras, and you would get them donated. Or for example, I shot 2 out of the 7 short films that I did. I actually shot up in Steamboat Springs.
Wow.
So I brought, 30, 40 college age students and grad level students from LA to Northwestern Colorado. And we shot 2 of those films up there. And I was able to get the community to donate housing or help with the catering. And so that's part of how you're able to, alleviate the budget. The cash part of the budget, because you're getting a lot of in-kind donations, and I was good at that.
And you felt comfortable doing that? Because most
Yeah.
people, including me, will always
I
have
was
difficulty in that realm.
I was always good at putting myself out there. I've never had an issue raising money for stuff that I was passionate about. And so that was a big break. Then I graduated from USC and I went into the William Morris Agency, which is a talent agency.
Which was probably also very hard to
Which was
get
also
into,
hard
right?
to get
Because
into.
That's
And-
at the top echelon as well.
And it was one of my professors at USC had formerly been a William Morris agent. So he was the one who got me my initial interview. And I definitely think that probably helped, so that's another reason why going to film school in LA makes sense.
Sure.
And got into William Morris and learned a lot. Like, you learn a lot about the business side of entertainment, but ultimately I realized I didn't want to be an agent. It's too far removed from the creative process. And then from there, I went to go work for the head of the COO of MGM Studios, which was amazing because I learned about marketing and distribution and acquisitions and business affairs and legal affairs, things that I never, of course, learned about in film school. And then from there, I went to go work for writer-director Gary Ross, who, wrote Seabiscuit. He wrote Big. He directed Seabiscuit. He wrote Dave. He directed Pleasantville.
Was Dave the one about the president?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was Kevin Kline.
Yes, Kevin
Yeah.
Kline.
So he wrote that.
Yeah.
And he directed the first Hunger Games. Brilliant filmmaker. Worked for him. And while I was working for him on the side, I was developing feature films with the short filmmakers whose short films I had produced at USC, and doing that on nights and weekends. And ultimately, we were able to get a really good script with one of those filmmakers and get that movie cast. And we were able to go out and raise about $900,000. And I left Gary as his assistant to go produce that first movie. And that was in June of 2009. And so that was the next big break.
And the role of assistant, in the film and creative industry is a big deal. That's how you
learn.
That's how you learn.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's all kinds of stories, not unlike being
Crazy
a junior
stories.
banker where they send you around running you in circles. You need to be prepared to do anything they need you to do. Probably, looking backwards in time, probably a lot of bad behavior accompanying it.
Oh yeah.
That area at times, but that's how you kind of get plugged in, start to build relationships, start to learn
Yeah.
how things get done.
It was crazy. I mean, it is. It's like you're being an apprentice. And at that time, the entertainment business, allowed for a lot of bad behavior, which has been thankfully cut down on in the last, 10 years. But it was a wild experience being an assistant to all these people. And I saw stuff that I was exposed to stuff at an early age that was insane. And also had to go run crazy tasks and errands for these people.
Are there any stories you could share with us? It doesn't have to be, extreme, but
I mean, one of them was getting a phone call at like midnight that because because someone had forgotten to email themselves a file from their computer at another one of their homes, that I would have to take a helicopter from Los Angeles to Santa Barbara and email that person the file and then fly right back. And so literally showed up at Van Nuys Airport at like 7 a.m. on Monday morning, took a helicopter from Van Nuys to Santa Barbara over the coast of California, which was pretty extraordinary.
Yeah.
Just with the pilot, landed in the guy's backyard, ran into his house, emailed him the file, which he had forgotten to send himself, and then flew back. I mean, that was wild. I mean, not driving up there. He wanted the file so bad in the morning that he needed to work on it that it was via helicopter. And then there's other crazy, going and picking up people's crazy prescriptions and, just wild stuff.
Yeah. So you're doing that as an assistant, but you raised money for
of my first feature.
Your first feature. And what was that feature?
It was called The Dryland. And
the idea for that, how did that come together?
So the filmmaker, his first film, his short film that I produced in college was called Muertas, which was about coyotes taking people across, the border from Mexico into the United States for safety. And so this filmmaker's from El Paso, Texas. And he was just really interested in, those types of stories because he lived on the border. And so also El Paso is a big army, has a big army base in it and a big military constituency. And so in 2008, he had written a script called The Dryland, which was about a soldier coming home from war and dealing with PTSD and focusing on the effect that had on his family members. Which you had really never seen done I had not seen done in a movie before, because a lot of times it's focusing on the individual, but not on the people that are associated with the individual. And that's what this movie did. And at that time, a lot of people were dealing with PTSD that were coming back from the war in Iraq. So he wrote this beautiful screenplay, and we were able to raise close to $1 million for it. And went and made that movie. And so I literally left Gary Ross to go make that film in the summer of 2009. And it starred America Ferrera, Wilmer Valderrama, this woman Melissa Leo, who's won an Academy Award, this guy Jason Ritter, actors at Ryan Onan, actors that are still, America's now, a star. And so a lot of actors that really kind of had great careers following that movie. And then that movie premiered at Sundance in 2010. And that was my first movie I had at Sundance. So
first of many.
First of many. And I had been going to Sundance just as a spectator, the prior 6 years since film school. So as you can imagine, to have your first feature film that you produce get into a film festival that you had been going to for so many years, early on when you were in college and then when you were an assistant, and then being able to show your first feature there, that's a big deal. And so you talk about another big break. That was a big break.
Yeah, let's go on a little bit of a segue since you brought up Sundance. And I have not been to Sundance Film Festival. I'm going in a couple
this year.
months.
I was going to ask you if you were going.
Yes, we're going to go for the opening weekend.
We're going to have a film there.
Really?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So They
Uh,
haven't. I can't say what it is yet because it hasn't been announced. But
oh, wow.
we're gonna have a film
Interesting.
there.
And of course, Sundance Film Festival, that will be the last year they do it in Park City.
Yeah.
And the following year will be the first year they do it right here in Boulder, Colorado, which we're all excited about. So
Yeah.
take us through your early experiences with Sundance, more as a spectator, not when you started to have films in there, but when you first discovered kind of Sundance, and what do you remember about those early years of going there and
Yeah.
experiencing it? And
I mean, it was amazing. So my first year going to Sundance was in um, January 2004. So I was a sophomore at USC.
Right.
And I organized a group of friends of mine to go up. We stayed in a condo, like, about 30 minutes from Park City, where it was more affordable. And we didn't have any, like money to, get a pass or something like that. So you would have to go wait in line for tickets every morning, in the wait list line. And occasionally you could go to the box office and there would still be, some tickets available to something you wanted to see, but usually you had a wait list. And it was incredible. Like, and I did that for 3 years while I was in college. And then the following, 3 years before I had my first movie there. So 6 years I attended just as a spectator.
wow.
And as someone who was having to go and do it in a very discounted, like less expensive type way. But I went with my college friends and it was amazing.
And
to
how,
go
mu- how much of time would you spend going to see films versus how much was socializing and networking and enjoying kind of the broader
For us, it
experience?
was mostly films.
Yes.
Yeah. It was definitely mostly going to see films.
And
Like
how many would you typically see in a given day?
probably at that point, well, because you were having to wait list, you couldn't see as many because you had to, so probably 3.
3.
Whereas, like, I think it's actually possible to see, 5 or 6.
Really?
But I think with the wait list, you were having to wait in line. Oh, those are people that are diehards, by the
Yes.
way, going to see 5 or 6 films a day. I couldn't even do that now, but and even with an express pass that gets you straight in. But having to wait list, yeah, probably 3 films a day, and it was great because it was like this was for all of us, we had all grown up on big studio movies, and this was our exposure to independent cinema was going to Sundance, which was something that you really weren't exposed to when you were growing up in smaller communities, as a child. You were only really going to the big movie theaters to see big movies. And so that's where I fell in love with the whole idea of what independent film was, which is, not governed by a studio and really put together just by the passion of storytelling and of artistry and for a low budget. And I've always considered myself first and foremost an entrepreneur. And it was by going to Sundance that I realized, wait a second, as an entrepreneur who loves films and sees them and has been focusing on producing, I can build a really successful career in independent film because a big part of what you have to do is raise money to get these movies financed. And I was just very good at raising money for things that I was passionate about. And then also putting good, teams of people together.
And delivering a great outcome.
And delivering a great outcome, which is just your taste. I mean, that's the other thing. Like making good movies and movies that get into Sundance and being a part of those is just about having good taste in stories. And I love the whole aspect of discovery, which is what Sundance is really about. It's about discovering new voices. So my first feature film premiered at Sundance, and it was incredible. My family came out, my grandparents. It was extraordinary. And it premiered in the Eccles Theater, which is in Park City, which is associated with the high school there. And it's about 1,200 seats. It will be similar to the big venue that they'll have here that's on the campus at CU, which I think has more than 1,200 seats. And it was amazing. And then I literally just made it my goal every year to produce movies that could get into Sundance.
And how many movies have you gotten into Sundance?
With the movie that's going to premiere there this year, it will be 9 over
how
the
typical
last
is that?
15 years.
How many people would be in that stratosphere of having 9 movies in Sundance?
There's a select group of us, probably maybe a dozen producers
Yeah.
have had that many or more films at Sundance.
Yeah, and the fact that Sundance is coming here to Boulder and you came to Boulder
Yeah.
was pure coincidence, right?
That was, I mean, because I moved here, in December of 21, and I was commuting back and forth to LA every week, but like, a couple years later, of course, Sundance announced that it was going to look for a potential new home, which I understood because Park City had gotten too expensive. Like, I love Park City. I've loved going there with films, but it was unaffordable to bring filmmakers and film teams there for independent projects. And it's because it's kind of a smaller community, and it's kind of like enclosed in this canyon. Um, and so it made sense to me when Sundance started looking at other places that would be more accessible for people and probably make it more affordable too. And so when, of course, I saw that Boulder was on the list, I was like, 100% makes sense. And then, over the course of that next couple, year to 2 years, I just kept telling, people at Sundance, whether they were staff or board members that I had relationships with, because I have been so involved in the Institute over the last, 15 years, just how highly I thought of Boulder. And so I'm thrilled that they chose to come here, because it's a perfect community to come to. And also there's an amazing university here, which I think will also bring in a lot of young people into Sundance, which has customarily been tougher because it's not like there's a major university
That's a
in
good
Park
point.
City,
Yes.
and it's so expensive even to get tickets. So the fact that we're gonna be having screenings at the CU campus just opens this up to younger audiences, which I think is really important for the future and success of independent film, because you need younger audiences to support independent film, to keep independent film alive.
Yep. And Kendall, who's sitting right across from you here, has been spending a little bit of time working with Jim Packer to
Awesome.
help progress the film program.
The film program, which I think is a great idea. Yeah.
Trying to bring a better film school to see it.
Amazing. I am totally for that. I love Jim's passion for making that happen, and I told him any way that I can help. That's is amazing. And for your audience members, Jim Packer, has he been on your show?
Yes, he has.
Oh, okay, so
Jim's
people will
been
know
on
Jim
the Very
Packer.
Roars, and
All right.
but tell us who Jim is.
Well, so yeah, I mean, Jim's amazing. Jim. So it's funny, when I was an assistant at MGM Studios back in 2008, Jim was actually the head of distribution there. So I've known Jim for a long time. I mean, I was much younger, but when I was working for the CEO of the studio, Jim was always in our office. So when I moved here to Boulder, I then found out that Jim had a home here, and so I've been able to reconnect with Jim, and he's great. He now runs TV distribution at Lionsgate, and he's a CU alum and very passionate about this community, and has this great idea to be able to really build an incredible film program at CU, which I think is an amazing idea, and I would love to be involved in.
Yep. Well, we're going to be having an interesting conversation tomorrow that you're going to be part of. Jim's going to be part of. Some key people at Google are going to be part of, and others from our community, where we're going to be talking about how we have this new momentum here in Boulder and in Colorado, but Boulder in particular, in part because of Sundance, and in part because there's a number of creative entrepreneurs who are, in some cases, very focused on the tech side of creative creation, but also there's a lot of content as well. So we're going to get about 7 or 8 or 9 together tomorrow and have kind of an initial conversation about, can we use all this momentum to put Boulder on the map as a major place where creative ideas are originated, either businesses or projects.
And I think it's great because one of the things that I think will inevitably happen is, by more artists and filmmakers coming to Boulder and experiencing Colorado because of Sundance, more people will be drawn to move here. Like, I have no doubt in my mind. I saw people move to Park City because of Sundance. There's no doubt people will be drawn to move here, especially artists. And so I think that intersection of art and technology is key to the future of both industries. And so I think having Boulder be a hub for that, because it now is getting Sundance. There's so many great artists here. It's already got this great venture community and tech community. I just think it's extremely exciting.
Yeah, no, it's a new passion of mine as well. So let's get back to your career.
Yeah.
Oh, before we get back to your career, let's talk a little bit more about Sundance, because you created. Well, let's talk about two things. One, you had a movie that won Sundance one year. Is that correct?
Yes, I had produced a movie called The Birth of a Nation about the Nat Turner slave rebellion in the late 1800s, which in 2016 won both the Grand Jury Prize and the Audience Award, which is a rare thing to happen,
Wow.
to win both. And it's an extraordinary movie. I'm very, very proud of it. So people can find it on iTunes, and it's a special, special film.
Nice. And then you helped create a. I'm going to botch it up. I don't have my notes in front of me. So tell us about what you created as part of Sundance.
So back in 2012, I had built a relationship with a woman by the name of Carrie Putnam, who at the time had just started as the executive director of the Sundance Institute. And I said to her, I would love to get involved in helping Sundance raise money, or just bringing more exposure to Sundance, anything that I can do. Because by that point, I had already had 3 films at Sundance, and was building really good relationships, not just with the film festival, but also with the film lab program, which they've been doing up in Estes Park here for the last couple of years.
And tell us what the film lab program means.
So the labs are where they select filmmakers to come in and workshop their screenplays and shoot scenes to their movies with top level advisors in the industry.
And what would a typical workshop? How would that play out?
It was, so in the screenwriting lab, there's, all the advisors are reading the screenplays and then sitting down with the writers and giving them their feedback and asking questions that make the writers continue to process and think about their scripts and then further develop them, with the idea of hopefully even making them, better. And then the director's lab, they're workshopping the actual scenes that they've written from their screenplays. So they're learning how to direct actors, work with cinematographers, work with production designers, sound mixers, costume designers, stuff like that. And that the Sundance Institute was founded. That's what Robert Redford founded it on over 40 years ago. Was the labs. The labs came before the film festival, and so as Redford would say, the labs are the engine that runs the whole thing. And so I had started reaching out to filmmakers that were going through the labs to help start producing their projects, which is part of the reason I've had so many films at Sundance. But what I was noticing back in 2012, 2013 was that it was very hard to raise money for independent films. And yet there were a lot of really great films that had been developed at the Sundance Labs that were premiering at the film festival, and then selling for a lot of money to mainstream distributors. And so I thought to myself, well, Sundance has this whole donor community of people that are donating money to Sundance because it's a nonprofit, and they're doing that for multiple reasons, some of which included being able to attend the festival and go with a VIP experience. And then you've got all these filmmakers that are trying to raise money after they go through the labs programs to actually make their films. So what about if we created a program where we were bringing together the donors that were passionate about independent film and donating money to Sundance, and the filmmakers that were developing some incredible projects out of the labs, and introduce them to each other? Which, by the way, is something you're obviously so good at. You're great at connecting people. So this was just, and I've been good at connecting people. So this is just about connecting people, right? From that would have like-minded interests and also the resources to help bring these films to life. And so Carrie and I, and then another VC guy by the name of Ted Dinter-Smith, who's from Boston, we created this idea for this program called Catalyst, which was exactly that. It was a lab for high net worth individuals that were donors to Sundance, that had an interest in learning about how to invest in documentaries and in narrative films, to come to the Sundance Resort, which is where a lot of the labs programs were at the time, and learn about that, while at the same time introduce them to filmmakers who had been developing projects that were coming out of the labs, that needed financing. And those filmmakers would do these extraordinary, 10-minute presentations about their projects, and then would have the ability to meet with these investors afterwards. And that program started back in 2013, and it's still alive and prospering today, now in 2025.
Nice.
And it's raised over $60 million
Wow.
for independent films, both documentary and narratives, some of which have gone off to win Sundance, Cannes, South by, Tribeca, Toronto, and some of which have even been nominated for Academy Awards. So it's been a really prolific program. And that first year of Catalyst, I had brought in, I think, 10 out of the 15 investors were relationships of mine that paid Sundance to come. And so I stayed very involved in it for about 10 years. And I'm really proud of the program. And it's just grown. It's amazing. And it's helped bring a lot of films to life. So it's connecting people. I mean, that's a big part of I think, what makes special projects and special ventures happen.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I have a big smile on my face because I'm thinking of all that's going on right now in Boulder relative to Sundance coming, but also relative to some of the things that we have our fingers in, and getting to know you and your creative energy and your creative ideas, because you've shared with me some of your other ideas about what you'd like to do. Man, I could imagine we're going to be involved in some really interesting projects and initiatives together.
I'm looking forward to it, because I mean, one of the things that I've just noticed about, just in the last year of getting to know you, is you love connecting people together. And I think that is just, it's such a great thing to do, because you never know what can come from that. And it's finding like-minded people too, right? It's like it's having taste. Like you have taste in certain people that you connect. And that's the same thing in having taste in the types of movies that you want to tell, or the stories that you want to tell. And so you basically become like a curator. And by the way, that's one of the best things about Sundance, is you talk about curating. I mean, Sundance is incredible at curating artists and movies. And so, you're a curator. I'm a curator in my own right. And so it's exciting, the types of opportunities that will happen here, because I think the thing that was, about Park City was Park City, I think, is really like a vacation community, right? It's like, it's really a place. I mean, people go ski there. Of course, people live there, but it's not like Park City has like a main headquartered office for like Google, like we have here in Boulder, and a lot of VC and tech entrepreneurs that have incredible offices on Pearl Street. Like we don't. And you've got that energy here, and you've got those
and the university,
people,
like
and you've got
earlier.
the university. So now you're going to bring this film festival, which by the way, I think the dream and vision for me for Sundance is that it becomes much larger than just a film festival. Like I think having, a music component, tech component, like it should be a gathering of people from all different, walks of life that are connected through art. Mm-hmm. And Boulder is just the perfect community to do that in.
Absolutely. No, I'm super
So
excited.
I'm elated.
Yes.
I will say this, back to your question. When I moved here 4 years ago, in my wildest dreams, I never thought that the Sundance Film Festival, which I have been so intimately involved in since 2010 and have been attending since 2004, would ever come here.
Oh, that is just fantastic. So let's get back to you and your journey. We kind of got to some of the beginnings of it, but we didn't even get to some of the most exciting parts. And I definitely want to spend time on your venture that you have now launched. But let's go back to when you were an assistant. You broke off to produce your first film as an independent producer. Take us through the journey from there.
So it was a journey of a lot of ups and downs. So I literally left, at the time I left an assistant job making $60,000 a year.
Because they don't pay those assistants that much money. You got to work your ass off doing whatever. And
so when I was working at Universal, I was on the higher end. Like I was making 60 grand a year. Right. Like I think, the job I had come to prior to that was like 35,000 or 40,000. So I left a job making close to 60 grand a year with full health benefits I kid you not, to go produce my first film, The Dry Land, for $15,000 and no backup plan after that, right? I was becoming a full independent producer. That was a big risk. And when that movie wrapped production in July of 2009, I drove, because we shot it in New Mexico, and I drove from New Mexico back to Los Angeles. And I stopped over on the in Telluride, because I went up, through Santa Fe into Telluride, like down to the Four Corners and back to LA. And I'll never forget going.
It's not the most direct way.
Not the most direct way, but I really wanted to go to Telluride.
Okay.
I had never been there before. I really wanted to go. I remember getting to Telluride and I'm being like, oh my God, like this movie's wrapped. I've been paid $15,000. Like, what do I do now? Like, how am I going to pay my rent? And it got rough. Like, I had to go back. I had to find another assistant job. I started applying to law school because I was like doubting what the decisions that I were making, because my family's all in real estate and they're like, how are you making money? Like and so I went and found an assistant, like a short-term temporary assistant job. I was applying to law school. And then I'll never forget.
And what age are you at this point? Upper 20s?
Like 27, 28.
Yep.
And I'll never forget, it was the week before Thanksgiving, 2009. The director, Ryan Williams, called me and said, we got into the Sundance Film Festival. And I went to Sundance, and that changed my career, because now I was able to say I was a producer who had a movie at Sundance. And that then brought on a lot more movies. So the second movie I produced was a movie with a $7 million movie with Robert Duvall and Lucas Black called 7 Days in Utopia. And then I made a movie called Brooklyn Brothers Beat the Best, which was like a $700,000 movie. And then I did a movie called Love, which was like a $900,000 movie. And then I started, and one of those movies premiered at Toronto. The other movie premiered at Sundance. The Robert Duvall movie had a wide theatrical release. And I just got really good at finding good projects and raising money for them. And I now had a legitimate credit for a movie that had premiered at Sundance.
And for these early films, so you're raising the money, let's move past that. What other hands-on involvement would you have in shaping
the project? The whole thing, putting the cast together, hiring the casting director, further developing the script, finding the location, even location managing some of those movies. Like we did a movie called Little Accidents where we had to find a coal mine that would allow us to shoot in, like an operating coal mine in West Virginia. It was convincing the coal mine to let us film there. Overseeing the entire pre-production and being on the ground on the location, being there every day on set, doing all the deals for the actors, overseeing post-production. A lot of those initial movies, we did not have the budget to hire what's known as a post-production supervisor, which is the person who literally oversees every aspect of all the post vendors working together to finish the movie, whether that's sound mixing, color correcting, online editing, visual effects. I would do that. So I did it all. I was wearing like 20 different hats as the producer, whereas like on a main big studio movie, like you're just wearing the producer hat. Like on these small films, you're doing everything. And I loved it because I was really good at multitasking, and I was very good at driving a process forward and using that like passion and persistence to align everybody to bring something through to completion.
God, I can't believe I wasted my whole career on building fiber networks and internet backbones. That sounds so much more fun.
It was fun, but it was rough at times. But but as I'm sure with your own experience, I just got really good at it. I got really good at doing the same thing over and over again, but for different stories and filmmakers that I was drawn to. And then I started to meet all these filmmakers going through the Sundance labs and developing stories that I thought were really interesting, and then I would help get their movies made. So I did about 15 of these independently financed movies between 2009 and 2015, and I loved it. It was amazing, and I made a lot of movies that went to Sundance and the different festivals. But producing is a lot more than just raising money. I was managing the entire project, and then having to do deals and like read contracts and work with the production lawyer and then work with a line producer who's actually
Would
organizing
you
the
have a
budget.
team around you at this
Yeah,
point?
you had I mean, but you had a team
But
per
you have to
movie
pull the team together and
for each individual film. It
Yeah.
wasn't like I had my own company. I was an independent producer, and every movie that I was doing, you were pulling together a production accountant, a production lawyer, a line producer. Like you're pulling the team together per project, and you're paying those people out of the budget of that individual project. And most of these movies were between, you know, $700,000 and $5 million.
and what and talking about budget, when we say 5 million budget, which of those movies did any of those movies take off and become commercial successes in that era?
The first one of mine that really like took off was Birth of a Nation, which I made in 2015. All the other films were, you know, they were doubles and, you know, and triples. They were not grand slams or home runs. But they all got into major film festivals. They had all gotten distribution, but they weren't big wins. The Birth of a Nation, which was an $8 million film, which I did in 2015, that was the first one that really took off. I had made a film with Richard Gere and Dakota Fanning and Theo James in 2013, which, you know, was $5 million, which premiered in 2014, which I was really hoping would take off. Unfortunately, that one didn't, because you just never know.
Yeah.
And when I was brought this slave rebellion movie, you know, that took place in the 1800s, like the last thing I thought was that this movie would take off, and it did, and it won Sundance, and we sold it for $17.5 million to Fox Searchlight, which at the time was the largest sale of any finished film in the history of the business. But like, I didn't think
that surprises me. So you would sell it outright. So how would that process work? You would sell it outright, and you said 17 million was at that point
the highest up. What was what you would call the advance or minimum guarantee.
Okay.
So that's how much the studio, because when you take these films to a film festival, usually they don't have distribution, and so you're looking to find distribution at the film festival, and that's a big part of what Sundance is. It's a market for buyers to come and buy films. And so there'll be a lot of entertainment companies coming to Boulder to look up movies to buy them. The Birth of a Nation at the time, that was the highest selling film out of a film festival.
Okay.
And that $17.5 million they paid was just the minimum guarantee. Had the movie made the studio a lot more money than that upon release, then we would have seen back end.
Gotcha. Good deal. Okay, so take us forward from there. Now you've got a movie
So now I have a big winning movie, and around simultaneously to that, I also was looking for, you know, a more permanent job.
platform.
Yeah. And so I'd been running around for the last 5-6 years making independent films. You know, I didn't have stable health insurance. I didn't have, you know, a stable salary. And so the head of Sundance Institute introduced me to this guy named Peter Guber, who owned a company called Vantage Pictures. And Peter is a very prolific former studio head. You know, he produced Batman. He produced The Color Purple.
The original Batman?
The original Batman. He's just a
Which for my era, that original Batman.
The one with Michael Keaton.
Yeah, that was like almost the beginning of the superhero
100%
as we view it today.
And it was. I mean, that was like the first superhero movie.
Yeah.
And so Peter's just a very prolific person in the industry. He's, you know, in his 80s now, but
I mean, Michael Keaton being cast for that role was controversial at the time. I mean, you wouldn't think of him as Batman.
No.
It worked for me. The film definitely
It worked for me when I was young and saw it. I mean, he was brilliant.
Yeah. How was that viewed? Because a little bit of his shtick came out in the character in that film, which you don't equate to
I don't
being the
know
Batman
much
character.
about that. You probably know more about that than I do, because I was so young. I don't even know what the background story of that.
Well, he was such the last because he was more of a comedic light actor, very talented, but not someone you'd expect to be the
like
star
Batman.
of the superhero. But even in his rendition of Bruce Wayne, when he was Bruce Wayne, not, you know, in the Batman character, some of his, like, you know, just classic, snide remarks, smirks would come out in the character. But I liked it. I think maybe some purists thought they
Yeah.
should have
It should have
picked the
been
George
somebody
Clooney
else.
type back then. But it worked for me for certain.
I mean, one of the things that you see in a lot of films that with directors that are brilliant are when they cast actors playing opposite the type that they're usually cast as.
Yeah.
And that's where the magic can happen.
Yeah.
So I think my first exposure to Michael Keaton probably was Batman, just because
Okay.
of, how old I was and where I was in my film viewing life at that point. But that's interesting to hear. I didn't know that, and that makes sense because that's a visionary director is
Yeah.
casting somebody like Michael Keaton if he was generally playing lighter roles into that role.
Okay, so tell us more about Peter.
So Peter, I had a general meeting with Peter, and it was a general meeting that then turned into a job opportunity. He's like, I'm really impressed by the things that you've done over the last 6 years and the movies you've made. Why don't you come and do what you're doing, but just do it under the Mandalay name? And I'll give you a salary. I'll give you an assistant. I'll give you some development money. And when you're talking to an independent producer and you're getting an opportunity like that, especially from someone like Peter, who's so prolific in the entertainment industry, you're like,
And did
sign
Mandalay
me up.
exist at the time? Were
It
you
did.
taking over?
I was basically taking over for somebody who had just recently left.
Okay.
And so it was becoming the new iteration of Mandalay under like a new leader. And that was going to be what I was doing. And at the time, Peter was very focused. He's been involved in buying the Dodgers, the Warriors, and so he was very heavily involved in those team acquisitions at that point. He was starting the Los Angeles Football Club, the LAFC, and so he was really like when I started at Mandalay, he was building his sports empire, which he's done an extraordinary job doing.
Hopefully, he was a holder of those for a long time.
Oh, and he still is.
Anyone who bought sports teams in that 10 years ago,
that's right.
The appreciation in the last 10 years is just monumental.
Monumental, and also his teams have done really well. I mean, the Dodgers, the Golden State Warriors, the LAFC. I mean, they're all incredible teams. And just over that last 10, 12-year period of time, they've all won multiple championships. So
is he still in the ownership groups?
He is, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so Peter hired me to run Mandalay, and I was at Mandalay for 11 years, from basically starting in late 2014, all the way until March of April of this year.
That's why I keep thinking of you coming to Boulder earlier this year. It's because the launch of your studio was earlier this year, and I was
commuting back and forth to LA every week. I was flying to LA every week, 3 nights a week, and then basically being out here, which was important for my soul. Like I needed to build space between LA and Boulder, and so I still had my place in LA. And
tell us a little bit more about that, about the space, because of how hectic it is.
Yeah, I'm one of those like all or nothing people, and so I did not really build a personal life for myself in LA at all from college up until about 4 or 5 years ago. I was just not dating much. Like I was literally just focused on my work. And when you live in Los Angeles and you work in the movie business, it can be all consuming because you're either out of state producing a movie, or you're in state and you're going to a function every night, a breakfast every morning, a lunch every day. You're going to screenings on the weekend. You're hanging out with your friends that you went to film school with, on the weekends. And so you don't really have this like divide between creating an opportunity for you to like have your own personal life with friends that aren't living in and are not working in the entertainment community and living in that bubble, and then existing within the industry and building those relationships and hustling, which you have to do if you work in entertainment. And so finally it got to a point to where it was like, I am gonna break. Literally, I'm gonna break if I don't create space for myself. And that was the beauty of the pandemic, was that when the pandemic happened and all the offices shut down in Los Angeles for close to a year, I went and worked out of Steamboat Springs, Colorado, which is where my family's had a home since I was 5, and a vacation home. And I just realized how much happier I was. And so I would drive down here to Boulder occasionally on some weekends, and I just fell in love with the community. And so towards the end of, the 21, I was just like, you know what? I gotta be able to build a space for myself that's outside of Los Angeles, and like build like a natural wall where it's like, if I was gonna be here, then I could literally say to people that wanted me to come to their function, "Oh, I'm not in town
Yeah.
this weekend." And so I got a place out here, and then just started literally flying back and forth between LA and Denver, and I would call it my school bus. I mean, the plane was a school bus. It's an hour and 45-minute ride, and I was literally taking it back and forth every single week.
Yeah.
But even though that was exhausting, it was also invigorating, even just to spend a few days out here each week and build relationships in the community and start to meet people that were working outside of Hollywood. And I've always loved the Rocky Mountains and skiing, hiking, and biking. And truthfully, I will say, like, it made me better at my career. I became a better producer because I was outside the bubble of Los Angeles, and because I created more space for myself to just even think. It's so much quieter out here, and I have the opportunity to, like, just, read a script and not hear traffic in the background, or be creative and coming up with ideas and building out plans, and not having all the, disorganized chaos around Hollywood that you have to deal with when you're living in that bubble, it's a very loud place. And so I had the opportunity to do that. And it helped shape a lot of priorities for me. And so I think, I understand why a lot of people love moving here from different parts of the country that have, been successful in different businesses that they've been in and have been really at the grind, and then getting out to a place like this and just having a better quality of life.
Yeah. The grind you talked about that you were experiencing in LA is very similar to it. I think a lot of us tech entrepreneurs have gone through the build out of the internet infrastructure, fiber networks. That whole industry was just year after year after year. Just,
Yeah.
You could barely keep your head above water. Your personal life was so intertwined with your professional life. There was almost no separation.
Yep.
And, made family life, difficult.
I had to build that separation. I had to. I mean, at that point, I had made over probably 27, 28 movies, and I was only, like 39 years old. I had to build it, and I got it by coming here.
Great. So Mandalay. Now,
Mandalay,
that's not related at all to the Mandalay Casino.
No, it's not. No. So two different things. So Mandalay Pictures is its own thing. It's Mandalay Entertainment Group, and then Mandalay Pictures is a division of that. And that's
what Mandalay Entertainment Group, is that what includes the sports ownership?
Yeah.
Teams? What else does the entertainment group?
I think there's a television and documentary division. It's the sports related ventures, and then it's the film, and then under that, one of the divisions is Mandalay Pictures, which is the film group, and that was what I was the president of for 11 years.
So and you did some major projects.
Major movies. So we made 15 movies while I was there. We made 9 movies for Netflix, all of which I'm really proud of. A lot of them went to film festivals. A lot of them were very big successes on Netflix in comparison to what the budgets of those movies were. We did a really great independent film called 9 Days, which premiered at Sundance in 2020. And then during my last 2 years at Mandalay, we did our bigger budget movies, because I started focusing on developing bigger budget projects during the pandemic because I wasn't running around and constantly on a movie set. So I was able to focus more on development and reading. And so that was where Air, that Ben Affleck directed and Matt Damon starred in, came from.
How did that come together?
So Air came to us, I believe it was in 2020.
When you said Air came to us, who actually came to you? Who was bringing it to you?
The agent and manager for this writer, Alex Convery, who wrote Air, brought the script to myself and my executive, Jordan, at Mandalay. We read the script. We thought it was excellent. And we shared it with Peter, because Peter had recently produced The Last Dance. So Peter had a relationship with Michael Jordan, and obviously Air was about the signing of Michael Jordan. Peter read it and loved it. And then we met on it. And 4 other companies met on it as well. but we gave the most compelling presentation for why we would be the right production company for the movie. So we got the rights, and then we went and got Sonny Vaccaro's rights, who the movie's about, and then we brought on Skydance, and then we sent the movie to Ben Affleck, and then Ben Affleck read it and met with us and said he wanted to direct it, and he wanted Matt Damon to star in it.
And how much directing has been done?
Ben has directed multiple movies. The most recent movie, I think, the most well-known movie before ours was Argo, which actually won Best Picture.
That's right. Yeah.
And then he's directed some other movies too. But Ben's incredible and tonally one of the best directors out there. He's very consistent in his tone of filmmaking within the movie, and he loved the script. And so we made that movie, and it was over $100 million film, and premiered at South by Southwest, and then went on an incredible run and did well in the box office. Got nominated for a Golden Globe Award, and and then was a big hit on Amazon Prime. And then the other big movie that we did recently that just came out this past year, which I did with Mandalay 2, was called Highest to Lowest, which is a remake of an Akira Kurosawa film called High and Low, which is brilliant. And it the rights were coming up for that material in 2019. The remake rights, I got them because I saw what the potential of it could be as a as a new movie told in a current day.
And tell us what the movie's about.
So it's a morality tale. It's about a guy who, on the eve of a merger of his business, finds out that his son has gotten kidnapped. But you soon later find out that it was a mistaken identity and that it was his best friend's son who got kidnapped. And at that point, he's already committed to pay the ransom for his own son. And it's the money that he's putting into the acquisition of shares into his company to try to prevent this merger from happening. And he now needs to decide if he's going to now stay committed to
I don't want to know anymore. I want to watch it.
Yeah, so it's on Apple TV.
Yep.
So it was in theaters. It got theatrically released and did well, and now it's on Apple TV. And it's Denzel Washington and Spike Lee, and it's a really fun movie, and it's a really New York movie. And
that was the one that that's the one you premiered at CU.
And we screened it at CU.
Yeah. I would.
Yeah.
I wanted to go that night. I had some things I was dealing with that prevented me from being there.
It was, and the writer came and we did a Q&A. But the movie premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in May, and it's one of the best reviewed movies of the year, and you can watch it on Apple TV. But we've done some, and that was $100+ million movie too. So after about 11 years, I knew that I was going to be getting married. Eventually I'm going to be spending a lot more time on the East Coast because my wife is a fashion designer, and it just felt like it was, the right time to start my own company.
Is she in New York City?
She's in New York City. And so it just felt like it was the right time to start my own venture. And 11 years at one place in the entertainment industry is a long time. And so, love Peter. He's my mentor. But I said to him, I think it's this. We've accomplished a lot. We've made 15 great movies together. I think it makes sense for me to go on my own. And so I raised some financing from people that I had worked with prior to starting at Mandalay on the investment of my lower budget films to start my new company, Vantage Pictures. The A stands for authentic because we've worked with a lot of filmmakers that have a real authentic point of view or authenticity to the stories that they're telling. And then Vantage, which means, point of view. So authentic point of view.
I like that.
And we're branded as being in, Los Angeles, Boulder, and New York. We're actually going to hire an executive in London to start in January. So we'll be LA, Boulder, New York, and London. And what we are is we're a production company that develops. So we put, our financing goes into our overhead and also into the development of screenplays. And so we're paying writers to write screenplays for us that will lend themselves to $30 to $100 million budget movies that we can fully, develop internally, put on great directors, put on great actors, and then take out to the studios and get them set up to get made.
And 30 to 100 million budget is a high budget for.
Yeah.
So you're dealing with the higher end.
We're dealing with higher
content.
end budgets, projects, more world building esque movies. I mean, I want to ultimately produce, the next franchise series, like a Mission Impossible or James Bond. Like, I have lofty goals in terms of what I want to do. And so it's finding those writers, that can help deliver those scripts. And the writers of Air and Highest to Lowest, that were ultimately each $100+ million movies, those were those writers' first produced screenplays. Those writers were in their 30s. So what I'm trying to do is work with my peers, people that are in their 30s and 40s, that I think have a lot of talent, to develop incredible scripts that have great characters, which is the same thing that all the Sundance movies that I loved. They're great and rich in character, but movies that have really big world building components, which you generally can't get from Sundance movies, right? Because they're lower budgeted films.
So tell me what that means, world
building. So movies that, have big environments, right? Like the maximum, I would say, if you were to go to the extreme of world building, that's Avatar. Right? Like they're creating the world of Avatar. For me, it's like, I want to create the world of a cool, espionage thriller that's international and global, right? Like a James Bond or a Mission Impossible. I've made so many movies that have been smaller in nature, because that's how I started as an independent producer, where they take place in small communities or small towns. Now I want to make movies with a larger scope. Wow. So it's like, if you look at Highest to Lowest, you'll see that movie feels like it has a large scope. Versus if you look at a movie of mine like Little Accidents or The Dry Land, that's a movie with a small scope.
Contained in a certain area.
And that's directly correlated with budget. So the movies I'm trying to tell now, the stories I'm trying to tell now, have to be larger budget, because I'm trying to make movies that are in a more escapist world that you would want to experience theatrically in a movie theater.
Gotcha. And you also have some ideas, I think, as to how to create connecting events, maybe here in Boulder, around, if I understood you correctly, those who are more in the prime, entering the prime of their career, bringing those types together around.
So, one of the things that Sundance is really great at is, hosting labs and programs for emerging artists and voices, people that are younger in their career, generally coming out of grad school or undergrad, and helping them to develop. What I would like to do is create a lab program for filmmakers that are already, maybe, let's say, 2 or 3 films in, or writers that have already written 2 or 3 films that are produced, that you would start to call mid-career filmmakers, for them to connect. Because filmmaking and storytelling, when you're in the development process, can be so isolating. Production's not isolating. Production, you've got hundreds of people around. Mm-hmm. But even when you're in a further developed part of your career, when you've made a couple movies, it still can be isolating in the development process. And because this community is so great in terms of what it offers, in terms of, its nature and its access to the outdoors, and it's vibrant, and there's a great energy here that I think we all feel, for those of us that live here, is to create an environment for these mid-career filmmakers and storytellers to come and connect with each other, create introductions and opportunities for them to work together, create opportunities for them to meet other types of people from different industries, like people that are in your industry and others, and to connect and broaden their relationship base outside of the bubble that so many of these people live in, which is in New York and Los Angeles, and come to a place and do some type of lab program. As well as, maybe bring in a leadership coach and focus on those skills too. But yeah, I think there's a need for that, because I know a lot of mid-level filmmakers that are so disconnected from each other, that are just looking for ways to connect. I mean, literally, I got a text message this past weekend from a writer in Los Angeles who's had multiple produced projects, one with some A+ level actors who literally reached out to me and said, "Hey, are you okay connecting me with so and so writer? I would love to meet more writers that are of my, that are in a similar part of their career that I'm at." And that's it right there.
Yep.
Those people yearn to connect, and there's been such a focus on connecting people when they're in the emerging part of their career. How about if we create opportunities for artists to connect when they're in the mid-level part of their career? And that's what I think is really exciting, and that's something that I would love to focus on and build here in Boulder.
Yeah, and we had very early conversations that we need to progress a bit. So you weren't here when we did the first Boulder Roots Music Fest, which is of Friday to Sunday, music throughout Boulder. But the week leading up to it, we want to start pulling into that different concepts that are about collaboration, about connectedness. So some of the ideas we're playing around with for 2026 include having the Wednesday night be a film night that we work with Sundance. So just a night to bring film kind of at the front end of what will be the music weekend. But during the days, we're coming up with different ideas for content around that draw people in who are wanting to get connected with one another, who are in a position to help support financially the music fest itself. But what they really want to do is build relationships with like-minded people in a curated way, where they have common areas of interest. So we have some ideas there, but perhaps that would be a good time frame to support what you're describing as well, where it happens in parallel during that week and bleeds into
I would love to help
weekend.
do that, because it's something that people really desire.
Yeah, for certain. So let's talk about the future of film.
Yeah.
And creating technology is obviously rapidly evolving with AI in ways that are both fearful if you're in the content creation world, but also will open up brand new opportunities. A friend of mine here in Boulder, who's also in the on the animation side in the filmmaking, just launched with his brother a studio as well around using AI for animation that should be very interesting. And we're investors in a company called Noctil that's bringing AI to sound effects editing for video. So as you think about how rapidly the world is changing when it comes to content creation, what excites you the most? Where do you get a little bit fearful about what might be happening? How do you think it's going to evolve in the next handful of years?
I'm excited about how AI is going to help us to become more efficient in our processes of budgeting, scheduling, and then the operational aspects of creating and bringing something to life. Personally, I'm not too concerned about AI taking over the creative engine of writing a screenplay and directing a movie. I'm not personally as worried about, because I still think us as human beings have a heart and soul that are bringing the best moments to movies and to storytelling and to being able to create stories where audiences emotionally connect. And I'm not saying that AI can't do that, but I don't think it's going to replace us in doing that. What I think it will do is it will create more efficient systems that we will benefit from, in terms of being able to process and get through workload and get things to be more on time and on schedule and on budget. That's exciting to me. Will it ultimately, I think, probably help decrease some components of jobs and of a workforce that are used in those processes? Definitely, because because it's going to become probably more economic and affordable. But in terms of like the actual content creation of what we offer as human beings, I'm not too worried about AI like replacing us. I think it can be additive to us, I think there's a lot of people that are very doom and gloom about it replacing us. I'm not sitting in that seat, but there will be people that are a part of the film industry, that are paid to do certain types of jobs, like in all industries, where AI will potentially replace them. But I think in the part that I'm focused on, which is developing material with writers and directors, and then going into production and shooting it, and then editing it, I'm only focusing on the things of AI that will create, a more efficient process for us.
Yeah, it
And
does
this could be
strike me.
controversial to say, but like that's just my own worldview. That's where I'm sitting, and I've been proven wrong about things before, right? So it's like, what's to say that in 10 years from now I'm not out of a job because of AI and there's AI producers? But for right now, where we are, I feel confident in my skill set as a producer who's curating artists to
Yeah, it
direct.
strikes me, and I'm going to draw on some firsthand experiences in using AI in its current form, that creative people can be far more creative by harnessing the power of AI. I don't think AI is going to replace creative people by any stretch of imagination.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to replace it a year from now, and I don't think it's going to replace creative people 10 years from now. But I do think you're going to see people like you, as you really discover kind of the fullness of what AI brings to the table, not just in today's form, but in its rapidly evolving, also in the explosiveness. Like you talked earlier about, you want to do that next level up where it's, you're creating worlds. And I don't necessarily mean your example like Avatar, where it's kind of made up worlds. Certainly it will help that as well. But even, the action films you described,
Yeah.
your ability to take that next level up and next level up again by harnessing powers of AI is going to be off the charts.
100%. Yeah. It's going to be completely additive to what it is that we're doing.
Yeah. The pace of creative change, creative innovation, as well as the desire of humans to want to be not just entertained by, but be engaged by these new forms of creativity, I think it's going to just be explosive.
Yeah, I agree.
It's going to be a renaissance.
I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
And the opportunities that it will bring, the cost efficiencies that it will bring. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah.
And by the way, I think that's another opportunity for something to happen here, in Boulder with Sundance coming here and bringing in all these artists too, is like having a convergence between, like people that are really focused on the AI tech space and interacting with independent filmmakers. So I think that's something else that, can be done.
For certain, one of the entrepreneurs that's going to join us in this brainstorming discussion is his name's Josh, and his company's Owl AI, and it was originated in large part by Jeremy Bloom, who heads up X Games.
Yeah.
Jeremy Bloom's in town, heads up X Games, and with X Games, a lot of the competitions have this element of scoring that is very subjective. Skateboard, snowboarding. So it's using AI not to replace those who are giving scores, but to help them really judge the competitions and see what's happening and bring more kind of credibility to the scorekeeping. And then you start to see how that gets applied broadly to sports, because Josh would take me through other ideas that they're fleshing out. Very exciting, but an example of bringing true AI, not to replace, but to enhance what an X Games experience would be like, or what the Olympics experience would be like. So there's a lot that's going to happen, and it's going to be a wild ride.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I'm excited. And the thing is, like, and I'll say, by the way, one of the things I loved about my boss, Peter, was like, he really understood live events and live sports, and as somebody from the movie world and what it means to connect with audiences and how important it is within the world of live sports to connect with audiences and through the storytelling. And I think as we've seen, like there's a continuation of that also happening in the entertainment industry in terms of how popular sports is and understanding the backstories of athletes, and then, even connecting in a certain way when you're going to a sports game. And so I learned a lot, about that from him too. And I just bring that up because, I think it's again, it's so important to emotionally connect with people. And you were talking about, X Games, which I think is an incredible brand.
Yeah, no, the importance of connecting with people in the real world, live, where certainly technology is going to be part of the experiences, but the importance of getting away from, being by yourself, being in front of a screen, being isolated in your remote work context, but spending a good part of your life, just like you broke away from LA to come to Boulder to give you more kind of complete life, more balanced life.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of what the next 10 or 20 years is going to be about.
I agree. And I think the pandemic kickstarted that into gear.
Yeah. Both kickstarted and also taught us how necessary human contact
is.
Yeah. So it changed our way we can think about lifestyle, where physically you can be, where you have to be, how you don't have to be together every day to get the benefit of human interaction, but you definitely need to be having live human interaction.
I'll just say, when you invited me to those through the, what's that program called? Connect?
Endeavor?
Endeavor.
Yes.
Endeavor. Yeah. When you connected me to that, and I went down to one of those, down to the Avalanche game, it was great because it was like I was going and I was meeting people in all different fields, right? I met someone who does, high altitude balloons. It was really exciting, right? Whereas if you had, I had been invited to that similar type of situation in Los Angeles, I would have just been talking to other film people.
Yeah, that was.
And so, it's just, it's so exciting to to connect with other people that are doing other extraordinary things in different fields.
Yeah, the 20 or maybe 23 people who were together in that box that night, that was quite the collection of talent.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurial talent, creative talent. It was, I could not have been more empowered coming out of that.
Yeah.
Just seeing that grouping of people. I was one of the few people who knew almost everyone there. I think there was one person there I met for the first time, but seeing the interactions between that grouping of people was exciting.
Yeah.
But hey, it's been great getting to know you. I feel like our journey together is just starting, and that we have this shared platform that is going to give us opportunities to intersect and hopefully collaborate together. And really enjoyed meeting you, and love that you're here in Boulder, and love kind of where Boulder and Colorado and where creative tech in general is headed. So
yeah,
this is going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun. This is such an exciting place to be, to have this confluence of creativity and tech and entrepreneurship. And it's really exciting.
And congratulations on your marriage, because that was
Thank you.
Literally in the last month and a half or so.
Yes, it was. The last
fantastic.
6 weeks.
All right, good deal.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Bear Roars. Check out Stretch, the new song from Dan Caruso, with music by Jason Mendelson, available now on all streaming services. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe on your listening platform. This podcast was produced by Loud Bear Productions and edited by Kendall Weinberg, with support from Gibson Siegert.